All right, guys. Isn't that the coolest picture ever? That is a picture of my granddaughter, one of seven, by the way. She is in the Skyliner at Disney World. That was one of the favorite, all that money you spend on the theme parks, and they enjoy a free ride on the Skyliner. You can see how they work. In fact, if I go to this other picture, it shows you, that's the entrance from the studios park, and I always thought those were great pictures. And what does that have to do with Disney Vacation Club? Well, I'm getting ready to tell you right now because that Skyliner may enter into your decision on whether or not to buy, or especially where or what resort to buy at. I promised you last week I would talk a little bit about how I got my DVC, my latest one. Actually, that's not true. Not my latest one, the one before that, for $77, because last episode we were talking about $215. I purposely called this episode DVC Oversimplified because there's going to be a lot of you today that are already familiar with it are already going to know everything I'm saying. The rest of you, I want to just put out there a simplified episode, tell you about the things you need to think about if you're planning on purchasing it. I hope last episode I at least showed you some comparisons to do. Now, this is funny because there are a lot of what I would call DVC experts out there, and everybody wants to be first when somebody asks a DVC question. As a for instance, probably the DVC Facebook group that I follow the most is called DVC Fan. It goes along with a podcast and a YouTube channel that I follow. Somebody might ask a question on there. Where do I go at Animal Kingdom Lodge to find the soda machines to fill up my mug? And within 5 minutes, there's probably 20 different answers. All of those answers say the same thing because people want to get on there so quickly and answer that question to be first that they didn't bother to read all the other answers that had already beaten them. So people are pretty, what's the word? I was going to say contagious. That's not the right word. Passionate about Disney Vacation Club. Here's how the Skyliner comes in. Let me back up. Let's talk about the $77. Generally speaking, the rule of thumb is, this is not always the case. I'm going to give you two rules of thumb. The rule of thumb is you buy at the resort you want to stay at most. We are Animal Kingdom Lodge Kidani fans. That's where we like to stay at the most. That's where I use my points the most. But I didn't buy there. I bought my points at Hilton Head. Disney has a resort in Hilton Head. And yes, we do, in fact, go there more than any other Disney resort. I keep shaking my finger. You can't see it, so I don't know who I'm shaking it at. But anyway, here's the way that worked. I went to DVC Resale and I looked at the openings they had. Resales are basically people are through with their DVC, whatever. They realize that they need the money to go to other places, or maybe they had kids and their rule of thumb is when the kids grow up, they're not going back. That's not my rule of thumb. I actually enjoy going back a couple of times a year just to do adult type things. And that's what what the podcast and the channel is all about. But I told you last week the current price to buy directly from Disney at the Polynesian is $215. Okay. Have I stayed at the Polynesian? Yes, I have. And the points I purchased in order to stay there were only $77 because Hilton Head, even though it's really, really nice, it's one of the lower for sale prices of any out there because people like to go to Disney World. So I was able to purchase that for $77. And here's one of the big things, the biggest thing about purchasing at a specific resort. Disney's rule is 11.7. Disney's rule is, DVC rule is, At your home resort, in our case, Hilton Head, you can make a reservation 11 months to the day, 11 months ahead of time of your stay. Now, I wouldn't normally book that quickly, but I'll tell you where it came in handy. They have really nice 3-bedroom villas. I mean, really nice. That's the top of the line room at these DVC resorts. And Hilton Head doesn't have many of them. So I knew if I didn't get in there right at 11 months, that I wasn't going to get it. And we wanted to take two of our families. I have 3 kids, each have their own family, and 2 of those families with our grandchildren were going to go with us. And that's the only place we could all stay together. So sure enough, I got on first thing that morning and booked it. And out of curiosity, I went back in a month later and everything was booked up already at 10 months ahead of time. So there's some beach club rooms that go very quickly. There's a lot of rooms in various different places that go more quickly. Now, having said that, so I purchased those points for $77. I still get to use those points at Polynesian, but the difference is when I want to stay at Polynesian, I have to wait until that 7-month mark to make the reservation. That means everybody that owns at Polynesian and booked it months 11 through 10, or I guess that's 11 through 8, they got in ahead of me. So there's no guarantee I'm going to get that room that I wanted. So I might have to go to a different resort. So that's the key. I'm a big advocate of purchasing where you want to stay so that you've got that 11-month window. Some of you are already saying, I would never book a vacation that ahead of time. Well, if you have a special occasion, Christmas, if you want to stay somewhere Christmas and you try to book it at 7 months, well, good luck for that. Anyway, all right. So the other thing is the number of years. Hilton Head is one of the earliest resorts that Disney Vacation Club threw out there. It's like Boardwalk in that it expires in the year 2042. That is 17 years. I'm 67 years old. So that means I have it for, what is it, until I'm age 84. And then we don't know for sure what's going to happen. At worst, they'll say, okay, your membership's over and we're tearing the resort down or we're selling it to another company. Well, then I wouldn't have it anymore. That is true. But here's the difference between young adults and old adults. With me, that doesn't matter very much. In fact, even some of the younger ones, if you've got a young kid and you think you'll only go to Disney World while that kid is still at home, well, you still got 17 years to do that. That sounds like almost a fully grown kid to me. The newer ones, like I'll use the Riviera as an example. That's their newest resort. That's open right now. That's their newest resort. We're recording this on, what is this, October 20th, 2025. It's open. Here's what Disney's doing right now. The newer resorts, if you bought resale points like I did, you're not permitted to book at those newer resorts at all. You can't use those points at all. Now, maybe the worst side is the flip side of that. If you buy points at Riviera, I think it's up to $235 of points. You can use them anywhere, but if you ever choose to sell them, whoever buys them resale, they are restricted to only Riviera. Maybe that's what they want, but I like a little versatility. So there's the 7-Eleven rule. There's some of the, by the way, Riviera is good until 2067. So you actually have, what is that? That's 40 minus 2. So that's 38 more years on that contract. So if you want to have it for a long, long time, you probably wouldn't want to buy one of the shorter year contracts. Now, here's an interesting statistic right now. One of the most popular resorts to buy points at in recent years has been Saratoga Springs. I love it. I stayed there one time. I stayed in the area that's called Congress Park, which means I could walk around to Disney Springs, pick up some dinner. I got it at Eat by Manette because that was the closest one. come back to my room in about 15 minutes. So that is super convenient. And you can also see Disney Springs over the lagoon there, and it's kind of pretty. At that time, they were still doing a drone show over Disney Springs, and you could see it from Saratoga. So if they ever bring that back, but here's what I really want to tell you. Even though that's one of the most popular DVC purchases right now, most of those people, I probably should say most, maybe 40% of those people never stay there. They're buying Saratoga because they've broken out their worksheet, and from the price per point and annual dues combination, they have determined, rightfully so, that over those number of years, it will work out more financially favorable. Now, okay, but anytime you calculate something through the year 2050 or 2060, there's so many things that are subject to change, benefits that direct buyers get that I don't get. Well, that changes all the time too. But I'm just here to tell you today that I'm going to oversimplify and say buy where you want to stay so that you have that 11-month reserving window. Then you can use those points at other places at the 7-month reserving window. I've never had an issue staying somewhere at 7 months, and I've stayed at Grand Floridian, I've stayed at Polynesian, I've stayed at Bay Lake Tower, which is the DVC building right off from Contemporary Resort. There's a pedway that you can walk across to get over to the Contemporary for food and all that kind of stuff. So that's the oversimplification. You can buy points cheaper through DVC resale. You won't have all the benefits, but I'll tell you, I saved about $30,000, and that's a lot of 10% discount. So that's the way I look at it. But given your point combination of where you want to stay, that's not going to work out the same for everybody. So that's the oversimplification process. The reason I brought up the Skyliner is that the Riviera, the new one, they actually have a Skyliner station right there at the resort. It's the only resort that has its own station. If that's important to you and you love the Riviera, you know what the Riviera is. It's that kind of concept. It's based on that. If that's important to you and you think you would love staying there every single time, buy there. If you buy at Riviera, as long as you're buying direct from Disney, you can use those points anywhere else too, but you can book at the Riviera for 11 and anywhere else for 7. While we're talking about the Skyliner, there are other resorts that have their own stations for the Skyliner, like the All Stars and others. There are some also that come close. There is a station of the Skyliner that lets you out at the back entrance of Epcot, which means you also have walking access to Boardwalk and Beach Club, 2 DVC resorts, and that might be a reason to stay there too. So you got a lot of things to think about. Young adults are going to think about it differently than old adults. I occasionally like to take my extended family. So as an older adult, I have that option. I go a couple of times a year before cruises, after cruises, and just in June, a lot. I've gone by myself because my wife goes on hiking trips with other people, and I just go down there to chill because I like it so much. By the way, make you Pittsburgh fans mad, I did wear my Bengals shirt today, so there it is. And that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next episode of DVC for Adults.